Ladies and gentlemen across the globe, I present to you the DJI OSMO. The DJI OSMO is a handheld gimbal made by DJI. If you're not familiar with the name DJI, well, this is the company that builds the very popular and iconic quadcopter or multi-rotor, the DJI Phantom. This is the Phantom 3 professional and advanced models. These are the latest from their arsenal of quadcopters, which are basically remote control flying helicopters. Now let's get back to the OSMO. So what is the OSMO? In short, the OSMO is a handheld gimbal. A gimbal basically is a device that is used to keep things level. So imagine you're filming on a boat. It's gonna make people nauseous watching your video as you lean to the left and lean to the right, sideways, tilting. Well, a gimbal would compensate for that. So while you lean to the left, it's going to keep the camera from leaning to the left with you. So basically what you're looking at here is you have some little motors here. So there's a motor here, there's a motor here, looks like there's a motor there as well. So that would be a 3-axis gimbal. So basically it's going to compensate for tilt. So if you tilt to the left, tilt to the right, it's going to compensate for that by keeping it level, but it's also going to do it on 2 other axes. So basically that's going to allow you a lot of flexibility in terms of how you can film and get very smooth results from your footage. So let's briefly go over what these 3 different motors would do in theory or in practice. So you have a motor down here. So you're holding this handle trying to film, and then let's say you spin around in a circle. If you spin around in a circle without the gimbal, the camera is just going to spin around abruptly as you do. But with this unit, you're going to potentially have, depending on the modes that are available, the ability to have it not spin with you. So you spin and then it stays. The motor here is going to keep the camera from spinning with you. So if you're aiming at something like a building and you spin around, when your back is facing the building, the camera is still facing the building, right? Because it doesn't turn with you. Or it can turn with you, but turn much more smoothly. So you turn first and then it turns after in a much smoother motion to get that abrupt motion out of the shot. Now let's say you were holding this filming a building and you lean forward abruptly or lean backwards abruptly. So now you're using this motor here. This motor here could stop the camera from rotating with you. So you rotate forward and the camera maintains level. It is flush with the building. It doesn't tilt forward or tilt backwards. It's going to just maintain a flush orientation with the building that's aiming at. Or it can follow you but do it much more smoothly. Then the final one is if you were to go and sort of tilt to the left or tilt to the right, same thing. You have a motor here. It can either stay level or it's going to be much more smoother in terms of how it moves. Now, the reason why there's a phone here is because obviously there's an app. The app is going to allow you to control the camera, to start and stop it, change different modes, and there's even a way that you can pan the camera, which is pretty awesome. So you can pan the camera and aim at what you want to shoot at. Some of the other advantages of a gimbal like the DJI OSMO is less motion blur. Because the more motion you have with the camera, the more blur there's going to be. So, if you're moving back and forth and then you're filming something that's moving as well, that's a lot of stuff going on and it's going to be blurry and potentially blurry and not as sharp. So if you can take out a lot of that motion, the tilting back and forth, forward, whatever it is, you can make much more, or you can reproduce much more sharper images or produce much sharper images by doing that. So again, by using this, you can have much more smooth video, and also you can have sharper video and also sharper photos as well, because again, some of that motion blur is coming not just from the subject, but from you when you're moving your hands back and forth. That's going to add blur to the shot, so that's going to help you out. So say right here, it's a low light scenario and your hand is kind of shaking a little bit. That's going to add blur to the shot. With this, it can eliminate a lot of the blur. Now, it's not going to completely eliminate it because this is just an orientation stabilizer or orientation. I like to consider it traction control for orientation. So let's just say he's holding a camera like this. If you move your hand up and down, the camera is going to go up and down. Now, because of the fact that you can make it so it doesn't tilt, it can lessen the effect of that moving up and down. But I mean, the camera is going to actually move up and down, so I mean, it will affect the shot. So if you were to make a drastic movement from way down here to way up there, now it's going to stabilize any kind of a left to right tilting or forward and backwards tilting, but you're moving the camera to a higher level. The camera is moving with you, so you're going to get that motion. So any kind of up and down motion is going to show up in there. It's really just the tilting is what it's cutting out. So it's spinning around in circles, tilting forward, tilting backward, tilting left, tilting right. That doesn't have anything to do with going up and down, right? There's no up and down. There's nothing to stop that kind of motion. And the same thing goes for left and right. So just realize that when you're filming and you're moving around, it's a lot of complex motion that's happening. It's not a simple thing. Again, you have all these tilting that's going on, forward, backward, left, right, and potentially round and round in terms of going around in circles, right? But there's also going up and down and left and right without tilting, just going straight up, straight down, to the left and to the right. That motion's also there, and this is not going to do anything with that. In order to compensate for those kinds of movements, it would have to not only be able to tilt, which is all it really does. These motors just turn. That's all these motors do. The motors that are on here, all they do is turn. They're turning around, around, and around, right? If you wanted to compensate for you going up, then you need to physically move the camera down. So you move the camera up, and the camera actually moves down so that it stays in the same position. But now it's getting a little bit crazy now because you need a big device to be moving all around the place like that. But the bottom line is a lot of the motion blur comes from the tilting. So just eliminating tilts on the 3 axes like this does can make a world of difference. So as you can see some examples here, shooting, wedding. Now, just how this guy's holding this with his one hand, he's probably going to be moving around. Normally, this would not be a great shot. You'd want to stabilize it somehow against your chest or something. With this, not as much necessary. I mean, always try to be as stable as possible. So if you can, I would still try to stabilize it on my chest. But the thing about it is you can still produce professional results without doing that. You don't even need to do that. Here is another example. On a bicycle, shaky, moving all over the place, this can compensate for that and give you very, very professional and usable results as opposed to something that's going to make you seasick. Here's an example. I'm not sure if they're taking videos or not, but if they're just taking photos, that will also help as well, giving you sharper shots because it's eliminating motion blur from all the tilting around. This is a great example. Taking a photo on this merry-go-round. Normally, this probably would be a bad shot depending on the lighting. If it's lower light conditions, this is probably going to be an ugly shot. Her face is all blurry. Doesn't really look good. It's a great moment. And you really wanted to capture it, but unfortunately, you didn't have a handheld gimbal, so the shot looks horrible. But with a gimbal like an Osmo, the DJI Osmo, is a good chance that you could actually get a great shot in this scenario. As a matter of fact, I'm very confident that you could get excellent shots in this scenario. A merry-go-round that's not a challenge at all whatsoever for a product like this. For a normal camera, yeah. Some other features that the Osmo has is the 360 panorama. It does an automatic panorama for you. Normally, you're holding a camera, you take a shot here, you take a shot there, you take a shot there, you take a shot there, and you try to line it up, and no. Click on a button and this thing does it all for you. It'll automatically take all the shots and give you a perfect, beautiful panoramic shot to capture everything. Another advantage of the Osmo is for those of you guys that are doing hyperlapse, think about that. You can lock the orientation of this device. Normally with hyperlapse, you're manually locking the orientation. So you're gonna aim your camera and try to keep this building centered in the shot somehow. And then you move the tripod and then you try to center it again. You move the tripod, center it again, move, center, move, center, move, center. But with this thing, you could potentially lock the orientation to aim in this particular direction. And no matter where you go, it always maintains pointing at that particular direction. So imagine putting this thing into a photo mode where it's taking a shot once every 2 seconds or something like that, and all you're doing is you're doing your steps, and obviously you have to make sure your steps are the same distance. So every time you step forward 1 foot, and then it snaps automatically. Another foot snaps automatically, but you don't have to worry about the orientation because this can be locked onto a particular point of interest. So making it much more easy and much more convenient to do hyperlapses and also just normal time lapses as well. As I mentioned before, you can take shots in lower light conditions because of the lack of all this, rotating backwards and forward and round and round. All that stuff is eliminated. So it's almost like you're simulating using a tripod. And as a matter of fact, that's the way to think about this thing. It's one of the ways to think about this. It's like you have a tripod in your hand. A pocket tripod essentially is what this is. Now it's not literally, because with a tripod you can lock a very specific position and orientation and it will not move unless it's an earthquake, of course. Now there is going to be some movement, but it's going to be so smooth and so subtle for the most part, with exceptions. But for the most part, it's going to be so smooth that it's like a tripod. As a matter of fact, forget about all this motion and moving around. If you just wanted to have a lock shot, so you're doing an interview where normally you just have a tripod and it's fixed, you're not panning or tilting or anything, just a fixed locked tripod, you could do the similar shot with this and have any motion in there be barely, perceivable at all. So it's pretty awesome. And I think it's a good way to think of this thing. As one of the ways to think of it is a pocket tripod. Not exactly like a tripod, but pretty close. Here's a visual example of what it's going to do for you. So here's something without the gimbal. As you can see, a lot of motion. You're tilting left, you're tilting right, tilting forward and backwards, and even a little bit of rotating around as well. But over here, you can see this looks so smooth. It looks so cinematic. And trust me, this is so easy to do. This is something that would have costed you thousands and thousands of dollars not too long ago. And here it is. You can have it in the palm of your hand for less than $1,000. And I think that's pretty awesome. Here's a shot of the front of the Osmo. As you can see, it's a 20mm equivalent lens, and it is f2.8. And as you can see, for those of you Phantom fans, you can see Zenmuse X3. So you can see various controls here, a record button. There's also a joystick, which is going to allow you to actually aim the camera, which is pretty cool. And the power switches over here. Here are some of the functions of the app. As you can see, video mode, photo mode, record. You can see the time is shown down there, the ISO settings, the shutter settings, the whatever mode for video. This is 1080p 60. And we'll talk about the various modes available as well. So stay tuned. So these are the options that you have. You have an X3 and an X5, and then there's also an X5R. Basically, what you're deciding on is whether you want 12 megapixel or 16 megapixel for the most part. Now, there's also a difference in the sensor size as well, and the X5R is just basically an X5 with RAW. They all support 4K video. Here's some accessories: a bike mount, universal mount. There's a straight extension arm, a tripod, an extension rod, and also a vehicle mount with 3 tripods. Oh yeah. The Osmo has a built-in microphone, but you can plug in your microphone using a standard 3.5-inch port or millimeter port. Well, that is the Osmo. I ordered mine yesterday and I'm getting it tomorrow, so stay tuned for full review.